story that must be told from beginning to end.
Now, here's a little story I got to tell.
Here is a story about music.
Stories About Songs. Season 2, now part of the Stony Island Pods family.
Stony Island Audio.
Back again. I want to start things off with a story about the great Big L.
Yeah, Big L is the first to represent.
You on the mic is Big L, that brother who kicks Flave Guard, known for sending garbage and seeds to the graveyard.
You know, I actually try to think about where I want to start this story. You know, I could start it going way back to Harlem roots, talk about the Fearless 4, particularly the Fearless Freestyle 83 song.
Keep rhyme on hand, stay in command. People in the place, please try to understand and experience with me. We'll split your hair because in this situation, you find me there like system after solar, coaster after roller. $1 million selling novel written by Zola.
Crash Crew from Harlem. There's some connections there, some seeds. Or I could take it to Queens and Brooklyn with the Juice Crew, who, you know, they came later in the 80s. I think I'll touch on those things if I can fit them in as the story goes on. Instead, we'll start in the Bronx with Lord Finesse and DJ Mike Smooth.
I don't front or pretend, cause that's imaginary. I get funky with the use of vocabulary. I'm more deadlier than a bottle of Sana. When I dig in my brain to say a fly rhyme, I might bust in, say a little something, get the party pumping, yo, that ain't nothing. So don't bore me, I've been naughty. Even as a kid, people said, look at Shorty. Back in the days, I had much attention. Speak of competition, man, listen. Even then, I could have been a funky star. At the age of 12, I was rhyming on a monkey bars. A little kid with the art of poetry. Nice for my age, but nobody noticed me. Nowadays, I tell it like it is. That makes my skill different from her or his.
And Lord Finesse is a unique situation for me. His debut album came out in 1990. And that's around the time when like rap albums were just coming out much more in abundance. You know, the first several years, 79 to 84, 85, and that was mostly 12-inch singles. It was rare anyone had an album. The early part of that, there were really no rap albums. Rap artists put out albums that had like 2 rap songs and some R&B, which I've talked about before, but rap albums were a relatively new thing. When Lord Finesse dropped Funky Technician, he's the first person I can remember buying an album before I heard any music. Like, I didn't hear a single. I never heard him on anything like a guest appearance, because they weren't that coming back then either. So I didn't hear. I bought the Lord Finesse and DJ Mike Smooth Funky Technician album without hearing anything. I think I read about Lord Finesse in like probably The Source, or, you know, maybe like a Rap Masters or something like that, talking about him, you know, supposed to battle in the New Music Seminar. So I think I may have read about him, but that was it. I did, and they might even mention like his early like 12-inch in The Source, and I had read about it, but hadn't heard anything. So that was just rare to like, you know, I pretty much bought a whole album. It's like, okay, based on the name and the song titles. That's all because I didn't even know the producer. At that point, I didn't know Premier because I had the Gangstar album. But, you know, even that was like the only produced, because Showbiz and Diamond D, like I had heard Diamond D on the Jazzy J project, but I didn't even make that connection, I don't think, when I was looking at the back of the Lord Finesse in the store. So the Lord Finesse is important for another reason for me too, another first. So here's the thing, if you don't know this about me, if I haven't said this on an episode before, but I've never really been an album person. And I think there's a few reasons why. It's a longer story than we need to get into here. But I've always been the kind of person, you know, that when I would get an album, I listened to the album once, maybe twice, pick my favorite songs. This stopped many years ago, but I'm saying like in the 80s up until, I say from 1981 to like 2002. This is what I would do. buy albums and singles, find what I like, and then when I have enough songs, I put them on a compilation tape, 90 or 60 minute tape, or for a brief time I would use 120-minute tapes, but that was rare. I didn't like the long tape. 60 or 90 was best. 90 was preferred. So I would just compile my favorites. So I would, every couple of weeks, I was buying a lot of music. So every couple of weeks, or at least once a month, I would make a new tape of the things I liked. And I generally wouldn't ever go back to the album again. I would have the tape with my favorites, and that'd be it. Lakehurst Mall was the place where I would buy my music back then sometimes. I'd go to record stores. Every once in a while I would drive all the way to Chicago, but there was a few places in Lakehurst to buy tapes. I wasn't buying CDs yet. That's not till like 93 for me. So there was I can't remember the names of the spots, but there was one spot downstairs at Lakehurst to buy. I would buy tapes from. That was the main spot. And then upstairs, it was kind of like a gift shop, kind of like a Spencer, something like that. But they sold some music sometimes. I got a few things there. I got MC Hammer's first record there on vinyl. Hammer time. I remember that. That's why I remember buying. It was a rare time I shopped there because we had the MC Hammer. And I wanted to check out. I kept hearing about Hammer. I was like, okay, let me buy this Hammer thing and see what it's about. But the other spot upstairs, they had tapes and they had a vinyl section. And so I remember seeing this Lord Finesse and Mike Smooth, Funky Technician. I don't know if at that point I had recognized that I had read about him in the source or whatever. I don't know. I was like, oh, okay, this looks interesting. And I'm reading the titles, trying to figure out, is this worth paying whatever it was, $10 to buy this record? These song titles convinced me, and it's on Wild Pitch. Wild Pitch has had a good track record at this point of putting out stuff that I like. I love the Chill Rob G, and they had La T. They had the Flavor Unit Connection and 45 King production. So on Wild Pitch. So I was already a fan of Wild Pitch, and I trusted the Wild Pitch brand. So I got the Lord Finesse record and I brought it home. And I was living at Foxcrest Apartments in Waukegan. Me and my roommate, DJ Mad Max, we were roommates and production partners, and also in the group Wild Style together. But we had this little setup with his turntables, and we got this nice big bass box speaker and this large, it was like a concert amp, small concert setup. So in this apartment complex, if we went to volume 1 or 1.5, we probably would get noise complaints. They could put it on half.
These go to 11.
So I took the record home. I'm listening to Funky Technician, trying to pick what songs to put on. I think I was okay. Now I have enough stuff to do a compilation tape. I've been compiling for a few weeks or whatever, and so I need this. My goal back then. I had a real low expectation of albums. To just show you how I didn't really value albums. I was like, as long as I can pick at least 4 songs worthy of going on a compilation tape, I got my money's worth. When I was buying an album, all I wanted was at least 4 songs good enough to go onto a compilation tape, and I feel like the album was a success for me as a consumer. So I had a real low expectation, but I had a problem this time, and I remember getting frustrated. I was like, man, I like a lot of these songs on this record. I can't pick what songs. I can't have this many songs, because I like to be kind of strategic with my compilation tapes. I can't have that much Lord Finesse on here. And I remember, so this the first, I bought it on vinyl, right? So I literally got mad, got up, walked out, went back to the mall, and just bought it on tape. I'm like, okay, this was not going to get on. So that Lord Finesse record, those songs I don't think are on any compilation tapes in that period, which was unheard of. I've been doing those tapes since 81, and I always when I wanted to hear Lord Finesse, I listened to the whole tape. And so that was what was unique about the Funky Technician record. I like that record because I saw the Juice Crew DNA in what he was doing. I was like, okay, it gets confirmed because on the scratch hooks, he's scratching up some Cool G rap. You're scratching up Craig G in the hook. He was a person who was a fan of the Juice Crew. And I'm not saying that's where he got his style from. He might have been like, oh, they're doing what I'm doing too. Who knows? But I could tell there was a connection to Lord Finesse. And I was a huge fan of the Juice Crew. And so then I was a huge fan of Lord Finesse. And Lord Finesse, he was like known for his punchlines, but how he really made those punchlines get accented is the way he did it. He was using great multi-syllables, but doing it patterns of 3. If you listen to like Baby You Nasty or Funky Technician, I think Baby You Nasty is the best example. You listen to that, you will hear what I'm talking about. The lyrical summary, there's only one of me. Lord Finesse is far from a wannabe.
Cause I could get funky and smooth like Cashmere and slay a rapper with rhymes that said last year.
And he wasn't the first to do that. People that sprinkled it in, Rakim did it on Paid in Full, and Kane dabbled in it, G-Rap dabbled in it. One of the first ones that really caught my attention was Letter to the Better, Master Ace in '89. You know, the handful of lines, but particularly the "It won't fade or run because it's made of
100% knowledge, the way to ton. Listen, bud, yo, your rhymes are dud. Pencil off, pen and I'll draw blood. Take a strong stance.
He could throw a few different techniques in there. Yeah, guys like the Wise Guys and Too Poetic coming in too, but Lord Finesse really mastered it.
So damn fly at this, so don't even try to diss. Put rhymes together like a stupid mad scientist in a laboratory. I'm a brother with a better story. Lord Finesse stand tops in my category. MCs are petrified with nowhere left to hide. I slay a rap and go, what's up, who's next to try? I ain't having it, poetical graduate, and me get whipped by who?
He's like really got this 3-style multi down pat. So Lord Finesse came in, was like he was doing that for pretty much a whole album. Like, okay, they did it for like a song. He's doing this pretty heavily on a whole album. That's gotta take some time to come up with that many multi-syllables. So I was a big fan. Beyond that, the story, this is a big album that it doesn't get its credit. Like here's another thing that it doesn't get credit for is that people often say that Nas Illmatic is the album that introduced the multi-producer, which is absolutely wrong because there's multi-producer albums that date back at least to 88. 783 off the top, 88 is a multi-produced record, and then 89, Queen Latifah is like that, and Lord Finesse. And Lord Finesse is pretty much in a similar way to what the Illmatic is, but more so it's the seeds to how you even get an Illmatic is the Lord Finesse Funky Technician in more ways than one, because that record, the Lord Finesse record, is produced by DJ Premier, Showbiz, Diamond D, and this album is also the blueprint and foundation of DITC, Digging in the Crates crew, which Big L was a part of.
Digging in the crates. Let's get busy. Keep on. Digging in the crate.
And the album also features, you know, how a lot of people first heard AG. Ryman is on that record with Lord Finesse, and you know, he's also DIT. So this record is the foundation for a lot of things. And then, you know, a lot of people will say that when Nas came out, it's like, oh, Nas sounds like he's like the same way that I feel Finesse picked up something from the Juice Crew. That's how I felt about, oh, Nas picked up something from the Juice Crew and Finesse. You know, like Nas sounds like kind of like a mix between Finesse and G-Rap. And Big L is in there somewhere in that passing of the baton or whatever as well. Because first heard Big L on the Showbiz and AG record, Runaway Slave, and a song called Represent, which also features Lord Finesse, and it features Big L and Ice Water Deshaun. And when that first dropped, I actually really was leaning slightly towards Ice Water Deshaun's my favorite verse, because he was just more like over the top. He was just more like bugged out. He was saying some wild things. I was like, oh, I want to hear what else he has to say, because he had a real bugged out way of thinking about things.
Yo, street corners in New York is the place this stand. With a machete, I'm a crazy Eddie Scissorhand. Born with such a thirst to kill, I can tap 200 quarters from a $50 bill. Cutting down with a 100-pound axe like I was raised by cycle-crazed lumberjacks. So in a battle I be stabbing, chopping MCs like trees, piece by piece, building cabins. I'm a maniac magician, abracadabra, making pain appear, cause I'm a grabber.
But Big L was like really impressive too with that. He was already doing that like perfect 3 style with the multis, but he had this like little swing on it with like the little roll of the tongue thing he would do to show the different like fluidity he had with his flow, you know, and he had like the ill punchline, so he threw the little shock value in there. So it was like you were seeing how that style was like just slowly developing over time, where you see how in 83 with Phyllis Ford did with Phyllis Freestyle, and then it has some different changes from there, and then you get to Juice Crew, to Lord Finesse, to then Big L and Nas around the same time coming out doing their evolution of that. And Big L was definitely one of the greats of that time. That's 92 when that Showbiz and Edgy record comes out. And so 92, this is probably 93, early 93, I think. I ended up going to New York. I think this might have been the first time I went to New York. At the time, you know, one of my best friends was this guy, Black Man Zeke. At one point, I was living with him and his pops. But yeah, I produced his early demos. We've been friends for a long time, and we went to New York. Step back for a second, you know, he had been doing solo music as this Black Man Zeke, but then he was part of this group called the 40 Thieves, and so they did a couple of things. But then this guy, Drew, moved from New York to come to Chicago for school, and Zeke and him became a group called Indigenous Theory.
They always miss when they swing at. Bases are loaded and I'm next up to bat. So now I'm a dirty up my denims as I hem them like the jeans of the bells as he swell from top to bottom. I
get my 2 scoops in the morning, roll my swisher, then I'm outie. Zeke be packing a pistol cause he's be getting rowdy down the block on the corner of my street in my hood. I'm down for saying people, cocking my 9 works just as good.
Drew is Gravity, aka Grav, who a few years later did an album in 96, put out an album on Correct Records, which people will know as the record that got Kanye his first production credit. So like when Grav was working on that Down to Earth record, I stayed with him back then, you know, so I was in some of those studio sessions, and you know, me and Kanye both stayed at Grav's mother's house in Harlem. So that's, you know, that's a few years after this, you know, where I'm about this story I'm trying to tell. But in this story as well, in 93 or whatever, is the first time that I stayed with Grav, because Grav and Zeke were doing Indigenous Theory stuff. So we were out in New York. So we were in New York and in Harlem, staying at Grav's mom's place, and he takes us to this chicken spot. I think it was 24 hours, but we would go late night. That whole neighborhood always had activity no matter what time it was, and I always liked that energy. So we went there every night. I think like the second or third night there, Zeke and I went to this chicken spot, this time without Drew, and we're in line, it's a long line, and we're just talking about hip-hop, and then we're talking about the industry, and I don't know, we're being dramatic, I'm sure. It's me and Zeke. And there's a person, 3 people behind us. I can tell that they're like listening to our conversation. They're kind of like leaning in. And so we start talking louder so that they can hear what we're saying. They never join the conversation, but they're clearly paying attention. So Zeke and I get our food, and as we're walking out, Zeke went out before me. And that person stopped me and go, hey, he says, you MC, you rhyme? And I was like, nah. I mean, at the time, this was 93, I had slowed down from MCing. You know, that's when I first slowed down, and I was kind of just like getting burnt out. But I still was rhyming.
This track is fat, matter of fact, more underground than a sewer rat. Thinking about a battle, even bother pursuing that. I ruined that piss poor plan, I ain't bullshit. Getting fools hard as a motherfucker, suckers, they got this into. This shit can fit you with dope. Hope you make a purchase, I'm into, mic check, 1, 2, run through. Stop to the stun you and daze you. It pays to have plenty of punchlines, metaphor, ill lines. Personifications for your rhymers, always in my time. With simple songs, there it once for you.
I think I really said no because I was where my head was at in that moment. I didn't want him to be like, kick a rhyme, because I wasn't, you know, in that mood. So I was like, nah, not really. I used to MC, but now I do this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, you rhyme. And I said it. I wasn't trying to be necessarily sarcastic, but it was almost unintentionally sarcastic because it was this thing. And it was a joke that we kept talking about on this trip, that everyone we meet rhymed. Everyone was an MC, and almost everyone would tell you they had a record deal. So it was just like, when I asked him, oh, you rhyme? He was like, yeah, and I just got a record deal. So that was the first thing he said. You know, I just got a record deal with Columbia. Then I was like, oh, yeah, of course, because everyone in New York raps and has a record deal. I was like, oh, what's your name? He's like, L. And I was like, cool, man, I'll look for you, L. And I'm pretty sure I said it sarcastically, probably dismissingly. I was probably a little like condescending. And I wasn't trying to be. I was just like, yeah, you and everyone I met in New York has this same story. So then I walked outside, and Zeke's outside, and we're out there. And for some reason, this is the first time I thought about, where are we? Like, where exactly are we? And so I look up, I go, oh, okay, Lennox and 137. I was like, 137? That's not, no, 139. Because on the Showbiz and AG album, they, you know, on the Big L, it's like 130. They say 139th in Lennox.
Yo, this the big motherfucking L for 139 in Lennox. You know what I'm saying? Saying what's up to Showbiz and AG because they got it going on.
And so I'm just like, what? L? So I go back in. I'm so like bugging that I'm probably aggressive with the door. So that L looks back to see what, you know, the commotion is. And I'm like, Big L? He's like, yeah, you heard of me? I'm like, yeah, you kill it on Represent. Because at the time, that's pretty much all that I had only heard that one verse. He had, at this point, the Yes You May remix had just dropped, but I hadn't heard it yet. I had heard about it, but I hadn't heard it. And he's like, yeah, I'm on this remix. And I was like, yeah, I heard about that. I haven't heard it yet. So we talked about that, and then we exchanged numbers. So I was like, yeah, man, he's like, yeah, I got signed. So you guys like, yeah, signed to Columbia? I was like, yeah, got a sign. He's like, yeah, I got, you know, this album coming up, Showbiz Beats, and, you know, Finesse. And so we talked about this album in this chicken spot, and then we exchanged numbers. I'm saying all he had was 2 verses out. So he was just like, and he was excited that someone that, you know, not just that he was recognized, but someone that didn't even live there. I was living in Waukegan, Illinois, which he never probably heard of. I'm sure he was like, I never heard that place. So I probably said, yeah, Chicago, close to Chicago. So that's how I met Big L, which was really, really dope to meet him at that time in that way. Like, you know, so I would meet people all the time. I really didn't even call people a lot unless I had a reason to. I wouldn't just call just to talk. So that was like 93. I didn't have the radio show yet, but I was doing some writing for the Flypaper, so I was calling about stuff like that. So I think I called him once. He called me once. We talked those couple times, and that was it. And, you know, then the album came out. Once the album came out, I never called him and we didn't talk. But I was a fan of the record. It had the punchlines, the shock value, great production, and just like, you know, great technique. But just like, he would just do these, like, he would just rhyme these multi-syllable things that would be like, what made you think of that? Well, he rhymed, what he rhymed with on that Stretch Armstrong show freestyle, when he rhymes beefsteak with my technique's great. Like, he just does stuff like, okay, not every person would think to rhyme those words and syllables.
I cook the mic like a beefsteak cause my technique's great, and I'm the police hating each state.
So he was special in that way. People don't ever talk about, like, I don't understand it. That song was dope about the industry.
Man, I wonder how the hell they reconcile. They rap so stale and frail and force like fairy tales. The technique and everything is speaks weak. You got a little airplay because of your beats, your fame and your name. But your lyrics are lame. Black step to this and get ran over like train tracks. Your raps are poor and whack, and you went on tour with that crap. Don't understand it, cause rhyme skills you lack. I got more soul than night airs, giving them C's nightmares. Raps be frontin' hard and rhymes they don't write theirs, but still call themselves MCs. Please, how could that be? I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand it.
Of course, the posse cut, 8 is Enough with his crew was a dope one. There's a bunch of dope MCs on there. It's got some joints on it. So I was a fan of that record. And then, you know, getting to meet him and knowing he was like this cool, humble person made it even more special. The album comes out in 94. It's probably like early 95. The Notorious B.I.G. album just went platinum. And so they had a platinum party in Chicago. I think it was at Club Drink. they had a platinum party there. And by now, since 95, me and Jay Bird, we have Caught in the Middle magazine. And Bird, I believe, was doing promotions for Bad Boy. He worked like the Ready to Die record. Like that's how I like met Notorious B.I.G. Like he came to a show. He didn't perform. He was just there hanging out. Like it was a show. Like he was there. Like DLC was there. The Licks performed, and it was a concert. And I remember like this Notorious B.I.G. was, and he was like super cool because I was just back there chilling. I don't really talk to people or harass people or whatever. I just chill. And he came up to me. He was like, "Hey, what's up, man? Notorious B.I.G." Yeah, I'm like, "Yeah, I know who you are. You're Notorious B.I.G."
Brooklyn is the land of lost, man. When you're in it, you're stuck in it. There's nowhere to go after that, man. You know what I'm saying? Anything else is just an imitation, man. Believe me when I tell you. Everybody try, but they don't succeed.
At that point, I don't think the album had dropped, but he had, had those singles out. He was definitely hot at the time, but he was still like super humble. He'll come up and meet you. So anyway, by now, his record was platinum. And so they had a platinum party that Puffy threw this platinum party for him in Chicago. And so I went there because of Caught in the Middle, because a Bird, got me in. So I'm hanging out, and it's like a pretty star-studded, like Puffy's there, star-studded affair. Like I remember, like I didn't know his name, like Lorenz Tate, right? But like at the time, we just knew like, oh, that's O-Dog for Menace. He was at the bar drinking. Someone was like, O-Dog's here. Like O-Dog's here? Like, oh yeah, O-Dog is here. He's at the bar having a drink right now. A star-studded affair. And then I hear someone like, I can't remember if he said my name. He might have said Kev, but I knew someone was acknowledging me. I turn around, and it's like this really, really like multicolored, bright shirt. Like it's the kind of shirt, like you bought that shirt to be the brightest thing when you were going to go. And it was Big L. He's wearing this like really bright, multicolored shirt. And he recognized me. He came up to me. He was like, "What's up?" I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "What you in town?" He's like, "I just came in for this." I was like, "Okay." So me and Big L were talking in the middle of the club, like a club drink. And then Puffy comes up because Puffy just sees Big L.
I want to see what table that bottle's going to. I'm going to send you 5 bottles to rock.
And so Puffy's there like, oh, this is Elliot. I was like, oh, this is my guy Kev. So I meet Puffy. And as I'm meeting Puffy, like there's like a photographer for the night comes up. And he's like, hey, can y'all give me a photo? So it's like, I think Puffy's on my left. I'm in the middle and Big L's on the right. So somewhere in the world, there's a photo of Puffy, me, and Big L. It probably says Puffy, Big L, and unknown. But if it's out there, that's me. And that's where it happened at. Because, yeah, I've tried to get that photo, but I haven't been able to track it down. But I would love that just because I'm a, fan of Big L. And it's just a funny photo of me, Puffy, and Big L that existed at some point. And it's one of those things you hear all these people theorize about, where he was going, what was going to happen, and we'll never know. But what we do know is in that time that he was here, he just did some incredible things as a lyricist. He was very passionate about what he did. Yeah, he was just very witty with the pen, and and the flow was impeccable. Just like if someone's like talented, and then you meet them, and they're also just like guys with a kind of special energy to them. It just makes it all the more rewarding to support their music or just listen to the music. Like, oh yeah, this is a good person as well. It's like so much so that like I said, I hadn't started radio when I met Big L, but April 95, he's out. His album had been out for a little while then. Right around the time or right after I saw him at Chicago at Club Drink, for that party, I started my radio shows. Right, I think it was both those things I believe happened in the spring of '95. So on my radio show, I was like religious about being there every week. Like that was like very important to me to be there that radio show every week. But in '99, I was just going through some different things in life, and just like I was getting burnt out from the show, and so I had stopped doing it for a while. I had this guy Jesse Ducker and Finesse, The Moment take over, and I don't know remember how long it was, but it was just like I just took a break. I didn't go. I was just at home chilling. I don't know if I ever told anyone this, but I actually wasn't planning on going back. I just had a hard time just quitting, so I was like, let me just like ask them to fill in and then just never go back, which is how I got the show. Like, so I just filled in for Jello, And then he just never came back. And I have no idea why he didn't come back. And I just never asked. And so I had a show for all those years. And so I was like, let me just do the same thing. I'm just going to just not go back. And then they'll have a show. But in that time that I was gone, Big L passed away. I heard that, he had been killed. And so I went back to do a tribute show to Big L. And so that's why I went back to on time travel. And I did that show. And then I stayed for years and years to come, and then stayed on radio even beyond that. Another way that Big L impacted me, I want to go make sure people know what kind of artist Big L was. Stories about songs, Big L, we got some great stories this season. Definitely stay tuned in.
Lord Finesse is nasty, period.
Before we get out of here, one clarification of something that popped in my head once I've finished and listened back to this, and also adds a piece of details that I didn't think of, so I remembered this. I talk about the album, and in the episode, and I'm a little unclear about the release date, and I do make a mistake, kind of. His debut album, Big L's debut album, Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous, doesn't come out till March of '95, but that is the reason why the one phone call when Big L called me was about getting an advance of the album. And I have one of the original tapes of the album when they first made the advance. It's the version that had the 3 songs they took off. Was it Times is Hard, Should Have Used the Rubber, and School Days. So I have that version of the promo that I got back in '94. So when I'm talking on the episode about having the album in '94 and it being out, it's just that it wasn't out, but I had it because I was doing Caught in the Metal magazine and some other things. I was writing for the Flypaper, and that's why Big L called me to get me on the mailing list to get that record. So clarification. And so that means when I saw him in Chicago in '95 at that platinum party in March, that was the same within weeks, maybe even that week, that his album was dropping out. He was out there to some degree because of his album was about to drop or had just dropped. So that gives a little more context to those stories. Stories about songs. Always more stories.
Before the rap contract, I was selling crack. Stage strapped with a Mac, I was into all of that. I started rapping and got nice as hell. If it wasn't for this, I might be doing life in jail. And some of my peeps are still in the game selling cane. If that's what you gotta do to maintain, go ahead and do your thing. But with the cash profit, make an investment. And try not to go to the grave like the rest went. Cause you can be rich with crazy loot, own a house and 9 cars. What good is that if you're dead or behind bars? And yo, it's not even funny. I seen a lot of my peers give up their careers for some fast money. They could have been boxers, ball players, or rap singers. Instead, they bank robbers and crack slingers. And yo, they